This episode of Midco Sports Magazine is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
We're all like, dang, is this really happening?
I'm not trying to be flippant or reckless, but to have it all in because it's something you can't physically see is different. It's just different.
Hello, welcome again to Midco Sports Magazine, and a big thanks off the top to our health professionals and everybody out there fighting the good fight against the coronavirus pandemic. This is our second episode of The Lost Season as we take a look at how our beloved sports seasons have either been canceled altogether or put on indefinite hold. And last week we took a look at our Division I universities. This week we will check in on our local D2 schools in the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference. David Brown has that coming up in a bit. And what about our high school sports? Jody Norstedt has a report coming up from North Dakota. And here is Jason Andera with some reaction to what is or what is not going on right now in South Dakota.
Every high school basketball player in South Dakota who is preparing to win a state title will remember that moment when everything changed. But how these teenagers reacted with perspective might surprise you.
Aberdeen Christian, 12 years with a basketball team. They are now going to be at the State B tournament down the street at the Barnett Center.
Aberdeen Christian senior guard Andrew Rohrbach had just qualified for the first state tournament in school history. His older brother David Rohrbach is the head coach, and he explains the moment when he and his brother heard the news that the state tournaments were postponed.
I was over at my parents' house one night when this was all kind of unfolding, and he was just sitting there on the couch, and he was like, you know, I might not get to live out what I've been dreaming of, my whole life is playing at the Barnett Center, here in town at State. And that's kind of hits you hard, You're like.
Players I talked to had similar gut punches when they heard the news.
I started crying in practice because right before practice I opened up on Twitter and it said that the NCAA canceled their whole tournament. I'm like, that is not good news for us.
But then really that's when it just hits you right in the heart. Like, we're all like, dang, is this really happening?
It was weird, just thinking and just looking around, and you're like, is this seriously the last time I'm in this gym or the last time I'm with these girls?
The Activities Association assessed the situation on an hour-by-hour basis and came to the conclusion on Friday, March 13th, to postpone the state basketball tournaments. That initial word selection gave hope to players across the state.
A lot of checking emails, just hoping that, eventually, things don't get canceled.
I'm holding out and hoping for anything. I hope we can play. I want to play really bad, so I'm holding on to that postponed as long as I can.
Yankton senior Cooper Cornerman has plenty of reason to be upset. The last two seasons did not end the way that he had planned. Last year, his team lost in the semifinals on a controversial last-second shot. This year, they came into the AA tournament as the number one seed, but once again, his dream of a title was eclipsed. I gave Cooper a chance to vent, but he took it all in stride.
Last year, yeah, you could say we got cheated out or whatever, but, things don't always go your way, so you live and you learn, and that's kind of the worst part right now, that I already played, I could have already played my last game, and I didn't really know it. It's really unfortunate that, we can only control what we can control, and either of our situations right now or either of the two from this year or last year, we could help.
He's not the only player who's impressed me with perspective. Each day we get deeper into this quarantine, these young people learn about life and are able to put everything into perspective.
Yeah, not gonna lie, when they first made that call, I was so disappointed and I didn't really understand why they did, but now I definitely do. From seeing the news, it's a serious deal that we all gotta be right on top of, so.
It's easy to be negative, but at the same time, like you said, you just gotta put in perspective and really the bigger overall picture, it's just basketball. Granted, senior year, it's one of our best teams I've been a part of, and all that sorts of stuff, but when in doubt, life's bigger than basketball. Once again, just negativity, trying to turn that into positivity in whatever way you can look at it, and just trying to stay positive, really. That's all you can do right now. Otherwise, it's going to be a long haul for you here these couple weeks, whatever, months, whatever the case may be?
Well, there's a lot of ifs and everything. Like, school keeps getting pushed back. I don't see how we're going to make time, because especially if people want to run track, people have things to do in the summer. It's not just like a requirement for state basketball, but it'd be nice.
The bigger picture is killing this disease and making sure that we stay on top of it. And I feel like that comes first, and then sports does. And, you know, like, I love basketball and I'm going to miss it so much, but this is really important too.
Looking towards, like, getting to the state tournament, all that kind of stuff. But now it's like, looking back at it, like, we had some fun this year. You're not going to remember the games, but you're going to remember that, like, three hour practice where we just, you know, beat the crap out of each other. You know, like, might not be fun, but you're going to remember that. And I mean, gotta say, I do remember those practices this year and stuff where they just dragged on and on and on. But you know what? Like, I'd do that again in a heartbeat to, you know, and not be in this position.
Up next, Jody Norstead on the state of high school sports in the state of North Dakota.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
When you think of tears in high school sports, you think of a season-ending loss, or perhaps tears of joy after winning a state championship. This year, tears flowed for a different reason, as COVID-19 brought North Dakota's winter championship season to an abrupt halt. The Shanley girls had just defeated Mandan to punch their ticket to the Class A state championship, and semifinal number 2 between Devils Lake and Davies was into the second half when the news of suspending the tournament broke.
Some of us went out to eat at Buffalo Wild Wings right across the street, and so like we heard rumors there like, oh, they're going to cancel the tournament, and we were like, no, there's no way that's going to happen. Like, we have one game left, and then we bolted to the tournament. Like, we had parents there, so they were like, you guys go, we'll take care of everything. And then when we got to the shack again, we heard the announcement that they were making over TV that our tournament was being canceled, and we just all started crying.
As the clock hit 0, Devils Lake went from celebrating a second straight trip to the state title game to the news that the game might never happen.
Especially the seniors in the locker room, very disappointing. And I think everybody was pretty amped up to play that state championship game, and it was it was a sad situation.
The boys' teams were getting mentally prepared for their semifinal round. Defending state champ Jamestown, Bismarck, Davies, and Cheyenne all excited to hit the court, but instead they were being hit with the devastating news.
We were at the hotel. I had actually just gotten dressed to leave for our pregame meal to head over to the shack, and my wife talked to me and goes, I don't think you guys are going to be playing today. And I go, what do you mean? I just got a text message from a friend saying that the tournament has been suspended. And I said, no.
Over the team group chat, they said, go up to this room, we're going to have a team meeting. And everybody's in there, and Coach Wilhelm was just talking, and it was dead silent. And then after that, some kids got up to hug each other, and it was just tears from there.
So that was easily the hardest conversation I've had to have with a team. It ranks 1, and then everything else below it is pretty small.
Last year, after we lost the championship, we made it our goal to get back there and, win it this time. But it was something that sat with us throughout the off season, and we wanted to. We were just waiting to get back to that moment throughout the regular season and everything. And to not be able to have that opportunity was something that crushed us and coach too.
First, I was very angry. I was like, why can't we just play the last 2 days? But then Coach Hoffner had kind of told us, and it just kind of changed my perspective when he said, we got a lot of grandparents that come to our basketball games, and that affects them the most, and maybe possibly saving their lives or any of the lives of the people in the stands. It kind of changed my perspective, and maybe that was a better idea.
While Class A players were being sent home, the Class B boys state qualifiers were dealing with the fact that their entire tournament experience was about to be wiped away. News that hit Edgeley Cullen Montpelier especially hard after reaching the first state tournament for any part of the co-op since 1990.
Not only for our kids and coaching staff, but I think the communities involved were, really geared up for it. Hadn't had a taste of, a state tournament for quite some time. So I think, and that regard, yeah, I think it does. It's not only the kids, but I think it's just the communities involved too ended up kind of getting shortchanged.
As a high school kid growing up, you know, when you're young and you're a basketball player, you always dream of trying to get to the state tournament. To be on television, you know, next to probably the state fair in North Dakota, it's probably the biggest event that we have in our state. So just being able to have the thought of being able to play in that tournament is something that every kid dreams of.
When you get there, your first practice, you get a little shoot around, you know, you see the big stage, you see the big arena you're playing in, and you know those seats are all going to be full when you're playing. So, and then you get up and you get to warm-ups before the game, and you know that's kind of where the nerves hit, and then after that it's pretty much all fun. You know, it's like you're playing on TV, so I mean you have to play as good as you can, and it's the best experience in the world.
That experience might have been taken away from them, but their teammates weren't. And it's those friendships that these high school athletes are relying on now more than ever.
I think a week ago, a team would have just been like someone you're playing your sports with, go to practice, you compete, and then you're done. But I've learned, especially this year, that like a team stays with you for a lot longer than that. You're in contact with them, and like the relationships you form just last way longer than the season.
Many of the coaches I spoke with said they'll certainly find a way to honor these teams that didn't get the opportunity to complete their seasons.
Coming up next, David Brown with the lowdown on the season shutdown for the kids and the coaches in the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine. The stories we've shared have all unfortunately come to the same conclusion. Games canceled, opportunities taken away, and seasons abruptly screeching to a halt. No one's pain or sorrow is any more or less hurtful than another's. But for the University of Sioux Falls women's basketball team and the Northern State University men's basketball team, not only did they not get a chance to compete in the postseason, but they found out after arriving at their postseason sites.
Back to Starr, driving, beating, Fox for two!
In an ironic way, the NSIC was both the benefactor and the victim of timing.
Northern State wins!
By hosting its conference tournaments in late February and early March, we got some definitive answers. St. Cloud State was the women's tournament champion, and Northern State was the men's tournament champion, both teams clinching postseason berths. 1 week later, we found out the entire Division II bracket on both sides. And while Northern State was the only men's NSIC team to make the field of 64, St. Cloud State's women were joined by their counterparts from Minnesota Duluth and Sioux Falls, the result of fantastic regular seasons. For USF in particular, it was an historic campaign that featured the team's second highest win total at 26, and its highest ranking ever in the Division II coaches poll at 7. The Cougars were already in Warrensburg, Missouri on Thursday, March 12th, preparing for their first round Central Region matchup against St. Cloud State.
We practiced at 11 and it's 3 o'clock and we haven't heard anything. And then right around that was when the announcement came out that all D1 championships and everything are canceled. And you knew ours was not far behind then.
You know, at that point, they'd already called off the NBA, and I had said quietly to my staff, I said, this is not good. If the NBA is not playing, there's not an administrator out there that's going to say, this is okay for us to play.
Northern State men's head coach Saul Phillips and his team were also already in Missouri for their postseason game against Missouri Southern State. They already knew they were likely to play without many fans in the stands, but then the news started trickling in.
There wasn't really the moment of the big announcement, but at the same time, Cole Dahl got up and just walked out. The finality for the seniors, there was some tears from me and a bunch of other guys in the room.
The anger, the frustration, and the raw emotion all manifested in different forms across the sports landscape. For Travis Traphagen and Saul Phillips, two men in charge of leading a group of young adults, there's perspective, but also confusion. There's no one single way to grieve, but these two men certainly tried. For Trapp, it was about reflection.
Here's something that was out of our control. The thing you were in control of is us being 26-6 and being ranked third in the region and South Division champs. You just go through a lot of the accolades that this team had gotten this year.
For Saul, the process is admittedly taking a little bit longer.
Your chips are all in emotionally as to what comes next. And it's going to be a big high or a big low. And for it to be a nothing, that is, I'm still not right. I'm not trying to be flippant or reckless. But to have it all end because of something you can't physically see is different. It's just different.
The USF seniors made the most of the hand they were dealt, taking a picture in front of the team bus in their uniforms.
It's a testament to the one last time of wearing their jersey, because I know they were excited about the matchup, about playing St. Cloud again and just being down there.
As for Northern State, it took them a couple of days to get back to Aberdeen, with the bus ride varying between the all-too-painful real and the surreal.
I've never been through anything like it. I just haven't. And again, I try not to be too melodramatic about it. For me, I get to have another season next year. Most of our players do. But the reality is looking at Gabe and Cole and Ethan Cranhold in the face and saying, hey, it's just done. That's hard. That's really hard.
The teams are back home now, but the players have scattered. The end of March is now more of a relief than a remembrance.
Good hope. Oh, my!
But the process of getting by comes with a familiar and hopeful thought. Sports will come back, even as time seemingly stands still.
We're trying, but am I doing it right? I don't know. All I can do is try to make sure that our guys are taking care of their stuff academically, trying to make sure that they understand that we're going to have another run at this.
Basketball, for me, is a huge deal. But it's also just a small glimpse of it's 1 year that this happened for the betterment of society. By the time we get to next year, it's probably out of sight, out of mind, and just back to normal business if we can get on top of this thing.
This is going up. And it's going in. Good hope.
The dichotomy between the two coaches just goes to show you how we're all dealing with this pandemic differently. Travis Trapphagen admitted to me because every team is going through this and not just his, it did lessen the blow just a little bit. Meanwhile, Saul Phillips, before he and his team found out more information about the coronavirus, even admitted they were talking to other Central Region coaches to try and find out how they could play the games behind closed doors, call their own fouls. Now, I don't know if Saul was being serious, but it just goes to show you that the mindset of athletes and coaches, no matter what obstacles they face, never wavers.
So there is some local perspective. And on a worldwide scale, there is the postponement of the 2020 Olympic Games that were supposed to happen this summer in Japan. Well, it also affects some athletes that you might know. Tony Smoragiewicz is a triathlete from Rapid City, South Dakota. And we did a story on him last October as he was in training to try and make the U.S. Olympic team. Well, that is obviously on hold for the moment. We talked to Tony about what happens now. Tell us where you're at right now and what you're doing this minute.
Yeah, right now I'm in Arizona, in Tempe, kind of near the Arizona State campus, and just keeping on with my triathlon training, just from a distance from everybody else.
And as we speak, I think it was just 2 days ago that you found out that they were going to postpone the Olympic Games in Japan from 2020 to 2021. What's kind of been your emotional response to that in the last couple of days?
It's something that I've been training for years now, so it's pretty disappointing, and it's actually the last few weeks or so, it's been on my mind that it's probably going to be postponed. So it honestly hasn't been surprising. I think it's the best decision for everyone, not just the athletes, but for staff and fans and spectators and the rest of the world too. So I'm glad they made a decision, but it's obviously still a rough time for everybody in the world right now.
It sounds like the decision was driven by the athletes and not so much by the Olympic Committee to finally postpone it. Is that true?
I think the Olympics is a big money event for some countries and some organizations, and postponing that is a hard financial decision. But I think when you have, I think the games are built around the athletes, and when the athletes don't want the games, then they can't go on. So I'm glad that all the athletes spoke up and they got their way.
All right. So what has this completely disrupted your training routine, or what have you been able to do and what can you not do at this point?
I can still swim, bike, and run. I can't use the weight room anymore. The weight room's closed down. All gyms are closed down. But we're able to still use the rest of our facilities. Like we just bike outside and run outside on the trails. We hardly ever see anybody. So fortunately for me, I haven't had much of an impact on my training. But I know for the rest of athletes in different sports, really impacted them. Like I can't imagine being a gymnast and your gym is closed down and you can't lift weights. So like, I don't even know where you practice your routine, or if you're a wrestler and you can't have contact.
What's the next 30 days look like for you? Are you what kind of time increments, I guess, are you taking this into as far as where you're going to go in the next year leading up maybe to 2021?
Yeah. I think the next 30 days are just going day by day. That's how it's been the last 2 weeks. I think it is for everybody. No one really knows what's going to happen in a week, whether they're going to have more restrictions or less restrictions. In terms of racing, we don't have anything on our schedule for a long time, and I can't imagine the nearest race will be any sooner than the end of June or early July. So there's not really a huge rush to be in crazy good shape, and it's just about doing some social distancing now and being smart.
Appreciate it, buddy. All right, take care down there.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for watching. Join us next week for another Lost Season episode of Midco Sports Magazine.
This has been Midco Sports Magazine, presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.